everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into today's Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 300 library systems across the United States and Canada with the goal of making Author Talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. I am Brandon Adler, your host and moderator in conversation with each of our wonderful best-selling, prize-winning, and acclaimed authors that you will hear from throughout our series year-round. Today, we are happy to welcome New York Times best-selling YA author Courtney Summers to talk about her writing, including her newest book, I'm the Girl. Hi, Courtney. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I hope you like my moody lighting. It's a very dull day, so got some dramatic contrast happening here.
Yeah, your pops of green are very bright and wonderful.
Thank you.
So we're excited to jump in and get started, but before we begin, of course, I need to go over some of that kind of standard housekeeping information that tells people how to ask questions and keeps everything running smoothly. So we did compile some viewer questions that were pre-submitted with registration, but of course, we'll be taking your additional questions throughout the conversation. So when you have a direct question for Courtney, you can click that questions button that's just below the live stream at any time to submit your question. If you're unable to attend the full talk for any reason, you have to go 20 minutes into it, that's fine. You will receive a thank you for attending email in about 24 hours. And in that email, you can find a link to the recording. Now, to formally introduce our guest for today. Courtney Summers is the best-selling and critically acclaimed author of several novels for young adults, including Cracked Up to Be, All the Rage, Sadie, and of course, the book of note for today, I'm the Girl. Her work has been released to multiple starred reviews, received numerous awards and honors, including the Edgar Award, John Spray Mystery Award, Sybil's Award, Odyssey Award, and International Thriller Award, and has been recognized by many library best of and reader's choice lists. She lives and writes in Canada. Well, you're in the right place, right? To talk to a bunch of libraries, a bunch of library patrons. Libraries love your work. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to connect with this many libraries at once. That's a career first for me, so that's pretty cool. All at once, all eyes on us.
All eyes on us. Yeah, well, just pretend it's just you and I.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess let's just jump right into I'm the Girl. I know that not everybody that tunes in has read your newest book yet. So can you give everybody kind of a quick introduction to I'm the Girl?
Oh gosh, I'm the Girl is the story of 16-year-old Georgia Avis, who is desperate to become an Aspera girl. Aspera is a resort that's on the edge of her town, and it caters to the nation's elite, their richest and most wealthy and powerful people. And she just thinks it would be great to help uphold and serve its secrets. And they have a penchant for beautiful young women, and Georgia certainly qualifies as that. So in her determination to insert herself into its environment, she goes to plead for a job and stumbles across a dead body, as can happen when you're on your way to your first job interview. And it kind of is about how all roads lead to Aspera, where she has to reconcile her heart's desire with what it really takes to survive, because this is a community that is built on a lot of sinister going-ons. It's based loosely on the Epstein case, if that's any indication. And it's really an exploration of the way that we commodify young women's bodies and exploit them. And it is about how there's a certain type of victim narrative that we all willingly embrace. Well, what does it look like when a girl wants to take hold of the patriarchy and use it to get where she wants to go? Like, if you're the patriarchy's dream, can you succeed under that ideal? No, but a 16-year-old doesn't know that. And this is really about, how she finds that out.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. You answered already Linky and Mike's questions, so we can just keep right on rolling. That was a very good introduction, because you touch on a lot of like the themes throughout the book. And Ronald is asking what motivates you to take on these hard issues that young women contend with in today's world, and that's when it's still mostly just a man's world.
Well, I kind of think of myself as operating in a low-level state of anger all the time. and then eventually it crests and becomes a book. I think that I've always it's strange to phrase it as I've been drawn to acts of violence, and not drawn to acts of violence, but like exploring that it's the way that women have to move through the world, in a world that often hates them and reacts violently to them just for existing. That rankles me, to put it mildly. So eventually those themes find their way into my work, and they're sort of a response to a helplessness that I feel in a situation that is not progressing or evolving or bettering as quickly as it could and should. Especially when you consider we're talking about the humanity of young women. Like, why is that always up for debate? And that's really what the books are a response to.
Yeah. And I'm the Girl is gritty, kind of like from the very beginning, right? When she's in the storeroom on her
Yeah.
knees, what's happening. And then, shortly after that, Georgia finds the dead body of another young teen.
Right.
And so the book really captures you from the moment that you start reading, and it's the story that is going on, but we all kind of try to hide from and push it out of our minds. So I appreciate that you tackle these issues.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's important to lean into discomfort, because it's easy to be complacent. It's easy to turn away. Like, we don't you don't want to typically say, I'm going to read a book that makes me feel really bad, but I've somehow built a brand on writing books that make people feel really bad. But I think it's important to engage with these ideas and make people question the way that they're moving through their larger world and what they can do to improve it. Because even like a minor improvement in the way that you're interacting with and perceiving other people, the empathy that you're approaching with, is going to have a ripple effect in a positive way. So for however bad the book might make you feel, it's giving you information to go forward and do good with. Hopefully not, you're not taking like the worst of its lessons and applying those to the people you meet, but
it's not a how-to on how to be worse.
Yes, it's definitely not.
So what do you then think about those who think the book is too adult for teens? Is it maybe a reflection of adults being dishonest with themselves?
I'm the Girl in particular has gotten a bit of pushback about that, because it's a no holds barred exploration of how one young woman feels in her body, and she is being groomed by two people, the owner of Aspera and his wife, in a way that reflects Epstein and Kane. And she doesn't recognize that she is being groomed. She thinks that her body is a tool of power. So it really delves deep into how she is physically and emotionally responding to the situations that they're intentionally putting her in, that are exploiting her. And it's very confronting, and the language is not, it's not holding back. And adult readers have really struggled with that. And I can't help them if they don't remember what it's like to be a teenager, because teenagers are picking it up and going, oh my God, I'm seeing something here. I'm getting language for things that I don't have the language for, and I'm starting to understand the greater scope and what they're actually, like they're understanding the nuances of these conversations, the way grooming works. If you're not having an honest relationship with your work and those situations, if you're not portraying these situations honestly, they're not going to resonate. They're not going to equip the young readers with the information that they need. It's not titillating. Anyone who thinks the book is titillating or gratuitous, I think is speaking to their own discomfort with the material. And I think that's a really cheap way to reduce what the book is doing and what I feel that it's doing. I mean, you cannot like the book. That's absolutely fine. But I think to dismiss it wholesale because it makes you a little uncomfortable is irresponsible, especially if you have young readers in your life who need to ask these questions and need a safe space that they can do it. Because what safer space than a book?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's irresponsible, like in the community's place in society as well, because if we were all introduced to these things, the things that happen in your book happen all the time,
right.
Then we would have the language and maybe the comfortability to talk about them with our young readers.
Right. Yeah, it's so. I think that's when we announced the book. It was just like I came out with like this plea, like don't look away, please do not look away. It is so easy to look away, and that's where people get lost. That's where the people who need the help the most and the guidance the most get lost.
Absolutely. Well, let's kind of talk about Georgia then a little bit more.
Okay.
So Georgia stands out among some of your previous heroines, they're all often fighting for kind of agency and power.
Right.
In contrast to that, though, Georgia also seems unaware of the danger she finds herself in, which you said earlier. Can you speak about your inspiration for and development of her character in particular, outside of the Epstein case?
Georgia is I think of her as like a subversion of my normal protagonist, because when you meet characters like Sadie and Lo from The Project and Romy from All the Rage, they've already been beaten down by the world. They're cynical, they're hard-edged, they know that they have something monumental is up against them, and they don't know how to fight it, but they're going to try. But they've already been told, the world kind of hates you, and this is what you've got to work with. And Georgia does not want to believe that she could be a victim of such an ugly world. She wants to better her situation. She thinks she can better her situation through her sexuality and the things that are coveted about her youth, her looks. And she's very naive in the text, but I also don't think she's as naive as people tend to think they are. The word stupid is thrown around a lot with Georgia, and it's kind of painful to see, because I knew that would be the response, but it's like, okay, you can call a character stupid, but any girl who's been Georgia is going to see your take, and they're going to feel like you're calling them stupid too. Georgia is not stupid. She just doesn't know how cruel the world is yet. And why would you ever want to, I think we often blame victims over their abusers for not realizing that the world is as cruel as it is. Like, what's taking you so long that you can't figure this out, that you would let this happen to you? Georgia didn't let anything happen to her. The world took advantage of someone who wanted to believe better of it. Mm-hmm. And that was what I wanted to do. I really wanted to explore a young woman who hadn't been shown that level of cruelty, and to realize how heartbreaking it is when that progression begins to occur. Because once it happens to you as like a young woman, like I can still, distinctly remember walking through a store once and a really older gentleman saying inappropriate things to me. And it's like, like the first time that happens, it's like, that can happen. It will happen. It could happen again. It's happened to someone I know. It's so, you don't get that moment before or back. It's always after that, Yeah, so this is the before leading to the after.
It's like forcing a forceful taking of a girl's innocence at some point.
It is. It's like varying levels of it. It's like you just realize you've entered a room and nobody's thinking it. They don't respect you. They don't respect your bodily autonomy. They don't respect your physical space. They don't respect your smarts. They don't respect your right to take up any kind of room at all, to have an opinion, to want. It's so sad. So and that makes me angry. So, and that's the book.
So then what was it like to write this book? I mean, it was difficult to read the book in parts, so I can't imagine that the writing of it itself was something that was a breeze.
It was so taxing. I always say, like, you shouldn't have to suffer for your art. Like, that's like a misconception about artists. We don't actually have to throw ourselves off cliffs to get a true artistic experience or an honest emotional landscape on the page. I suffered for this book. It was very upsetting. The research was upsetting. And the amount of research I did was, to me, research is a form of accountability. And I want to make sure that I'm always keeping the humanity of the victims at the forefront of my mind when I explore a story like this. It's not about the abuse. It's about the people who are suffering that abuse, and honoring their experiences and their truths and how they feel and what they went through. And so I was always immersed in like victim testimonies and documentaries and unpublished memoirs and in the court transcripts. And And eventually, like, you realize, why am I not sleeping well? Why am I upset all the time? It feels like it's kind of fair trade, honestly, because I don't think it should be easy to write a book like this. I didn't enjoy it, but I don't think I should have.
Yeah. I mean, the message isn't.
It's not sunshine and rainbows.
It's not. And unfortunately, like, writing a book like this, I don't want to talk about the ending. Somebody asked if you thought of other endings or shopped other endings than the one that you ended up with, but like, you can't.
Nobody wants the endings I write. I'm so used to that question now. It's okay. We can like.
I'm just like, you can't. The type of books that you are writing and the attention that you're bringing to these issues, they can't have happy endings because that's not the real world.
What's really I don't know, funny is the word, is after like my agent read it and my editor read it, they're like, this is the happiest ending you've ever written, which it sounds like such a strange thing. And I viewed it that way too, because to me, just to indicate a little bit without spoiling, Georgia is believed in the eyes of someone who really matters to her. And that is a small kernel, a starting point for her to reclaim her agency. And I think people really underestimate how powerful it is to be seen in the eyes of even just one person, because I got a lot of feedback. Actually, I don't think it is a spoiler to say, a sparrow wins. The bad guys kind of win the larger picture, but they don't defeat Georgia. And that's a huge moment. And I get a lot of feedback that's like, well, nobody burnt the resort to the ground. Nobody killed the guys that are doing this. Well, that's not what happens if you see how long it took for Epstein's victims to get justice, and that they even got it at all. I mean, it's such a process to put yourself through. Georgia was seen in the eyes of one person who believed her, and it gave something of herself back to herself. And maybe she will grow up to be a woman that comes back and says, I know what you did to me, and I'm going to make sure you never do this again. But that has to have a starting point, and that starting point is just being able to look someone in the eyes and say, and this shouldn't have happened to you. And that's what Georgia gets at the end.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. I think that we're frozen, Courtney.
Am I back?
Yep, I hear. There you are. You're back. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. It's the weather and everything. Okay. Where did it stop me from?
I think you were actually finishing up. You were like,
yeah, I was. It's not justice in the larger sense, but it is a form of justice and vindication in a sense that is very powerful and important, I think.
Okay, good. So I've been getting a couple of questions, and I'm super curious about this too. I didn't even think about it until Kat asked the question in pre-submitted questions, and then Grace just asked it here live. I noticed that some of the chapters of I'm the Girl have a teardrop on the first page and others don't. My friend and I both tried to figure out the significance or the meaning of them, but couldn't. Can you please solve this mystery for us?
This is awful because it's the worst kind of mystery. Actually, it will depend also if you read the ARC or read the finished copy. It was to denote just a more substantial passage of time. So if something was happening within the same day, there was no teardrop to break up the chapters. But if it was a new day, there'd be a teardrop. But for the ARC, I kind of screwed up a few passages of time, so there was no there's no rhyme or reason to the teardrops in the ARC when there was supposed to be. And in the finished copy, it should make sense. Or maybe it still doesn't. Maybe it's I don't know. I love the idea that it's a lot more sinister or cooler than that, but it was really just a chronology thing.
Okay, well, that's good. At first, I was like, oh, yeah, maybe it has something to do with the necklace that Cleo gave her. And so then I started looking to see if, like, Cleo was in every one of the chapters and had the teardrop. Like,
that would have been cooler, actually. Where were you when I needed you?
It's good to know, though. Mystery solved.
Oh, I'm so mad I didn't use that to mark every Aspera moment. Oh, lost
Oh, no.
opportunity. That's gonna haunt me all day, all night, and into my next life. So thank you, Brandon.
Well, just send me your draft for your next book, and I'll tell you where to
Okay.
put the Easter egg. Okay, so one of the things that I might be off base here, but I noticed throughout the book that Georgia has these moments of like what seem like very clear confidence, like
Right.
in the way that, but it also always revolved around the way that she looks. So then I started thinking about kind of like how the patriarchy, what, like a pretty girl, even at 15, 16, I mean, even younger, like 5,
Right.
the first thing that people often say is, "Oh, you're so pretty." And so then I kind of started wondering, is like, was Georgia's confidence on the page actually not confidence at all, but just a reflection of what the patriarchy had been telling her the entire time?
I think George's perspective is like 100% informed by the patriarchy. Like she is, you can kind of see it on the cover. She was based on Marilyn Monroe. Like I did a lot of research on Marilyn Monroe for George's character because Marilyn Monroe, I think she was like something like in her like 12 or 13 when she started to develop physically and catch the eyes of people. Like she would say that women hated me, men thought, I was just awesome, and she didn't know how to like navigate that, but she knew she had power. So I wanted Georgia to understand that she had a level of power within the patriarchal heteronormative cis, that whole umbrella,
Yeah.
but that's this you don't really have power over over a like a structure, a power dynamic that is like controlling you and determining what is the standard of beauty and everything. Like everything that she thinks is so great about herself is something that has been decided by a system that is set up to exploit her. So I think in George's limited understanding of what power and beauty can do for her, she thinks she has ownership over it, but she doesn't at all, which is something she slowly and gradually and terribly realizes over the course of the novel.
Hmm. Well, and
Yeah.
we start to see even like kind of the way, that Nora is seeing Georgia.
Right. Nora is really like she gets hard on Georgia. Like she's I think one of the first characters to call her stupid. But if you look through the book, Georgia is constantly afraid of being perceived that way. Like she'll say, I'm not stupid. I know this. I can do this and this and this. She is so worried about being made a fool of for wanting to believe that, she can be the like the she can control her situation, that she's almost refusing the red flags at a lot of points. Like there are some she's not totally aware of, but there's some I think she's unconsciously aware of, but she can't accept because then she realizes I'm just what everyone thinks I am. I'm stupid. I would rather be beautiful than stupid, like perceived that way. So she's constantly in this push and pull between what she consciously knows and what she unconsciously knows. And then there's Nora who interjects every now and then saying, you should know this. Why don't you know this? Well, when everyone's telling you a different thing about yourself, you want to latch onto the thing that makes you feel like you have more agency. And who feels like they have agency when someone's going, you fool, like what is wrong with you? You want to believe Matthew, who's going, you're the most special thing that's walked in this door.
Yeah, and like it's reinforced when, like, I keep thinking of the scene where Kel says Polaris, and she's like
Yeah.
Polaris, and she
What
looks it
is
up.
Polaris?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, I'm so stupid. Like, and it's like she's reinforcing like what was being told to her. But then she always retorts to Nora, "Why can't I have something good? Why can't anyone believe that I can do something great?"
Right. And it's like because they see it, because they're slightly like Nora is she's I would say she's a butch leaning lesbian, so the world is going to be a different kind of experience for her, and how she's perceived, how she's received. I don't delve too far into that, but that's going to inform Nora's perspective of what's going on around Georgia, and it's just flying right over Georgia's head. And she's getting, Georgia's getting everything that she thinks she wants. In the meantime, like I can sit here and be chastised by someone who I have a crush on, or I can be told that a movie producer thinks I have potential. Like it's sorry, Nora, you win in the end, but like it's hard work getting there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the character of Nora. So Nora is the girl who was found dead. It's her sister,
Right.
Ashley's sister, and I kind of like the character juxtaposition between the two. Like you said, that she's like butch leaning, and then like Georgia is very like kind of I guess what you would call like lipstick lesbian,
Right.
Beautiful, stereotypically beautiful,
Right.
and but the pieces of them that aren't there in the story they seem to be reflected in one another. So like Georgia never had a father figure. Nora's mother
Right.
left, so she only had the father. Is that something that you did intentionally so that they like filled in the missing pieces that the other character didn't have?
That's so good. That makes me feel really good. I love when an interpretation is just like, yeah, she saw it. Yeah, they are supposed to offer those contrasts to one another. I really love the gaps that Nora and George fill with one another. And another thing that I like about, I mean, you have to be willing to accept Nora's vulnerability to accept a lot of George's strength. And I think I'm really gratified when readers recognize that Georgia, for all her perceived faults and some of her more naive turns of character, she is always the one to say, I'm here for you, Nora. She's always the one to unquestioningly take on Nora's anger at her. She will, it's not always a healthy dynamic. These girls are going through a lot of trauma, but George knows how to contextualize what Nora is going through, whereas Nora will react to what George is going through and kind of take it out on George. George is always there to say, like, Nora, I'm here. Nora, let me be here. Nora, I'm just gonna, my presence, I'm here for you. And I just love the sort of contrast that they constantly, the voids that they each have in their own lives that kind of mirror one another. Yeah, they were really a lot of fun to write. And I think if you let Nora be vulnerable on the page instead of just as a figure to correct George or chastise her or be like the voice of reason, you understand how much George was bringing to that dynamic too, and that's something that I really enjoyed writing.
Good, thank you for that. I'm glad that I was seeing it correctly because that doesn't always happen either.
We're both so happy. Highlight.
Yeah, I love it when they're like, no, that's not at all what I was thinking.
Yeah, you've embarrassed us both. No, nobody would do it.
So Christina is saying, I'm curious about how you approach parental figures in your books, when maybe they don't fit into the story or you kind of kill them off altogether. But I kind of think that parental figures play a huge role in your stories.
They do. Like I always get a lot of flack, like, oh, Courtney Summers has killed an adult character again. It's the least thing. I'm so not worried about that because I'm not writing a YA about parents. Like, why would I write a young adult fiction that it's like about, like there's obviously like the parental influence. There's a huge impact that parents have, but like if I don't need a parent on the page to reflect those concepts, I'm not sorry that nobody's going to see a lot of mom and dad in a Courtney Summers novel, but you're right. Their impact and their role in these books are keenly felt. I never get over that. You killed them though, or they're absent. It's like, yeah, but they're not absent. You're so totally shaped by the lack of or the presence of an adult figure in your life. So to sort of reduce it down to, oh, another YA with dead or absent parents. It's like it's a metaphor. Just roll with it. But yeah, George is like very her mother just died. That's another thing people don't really seem to they don't allow her the grace of that experience. Yeah. She has just lost her mother, and her mother before she died was trying to protect George from Aspera, and she was doing it in entirely the wrong way. I think Tyler says it at one point in the book. He says she said she loved you imperfectly, and a lot of George's mother's response to George's burgeoning sexuality and her physical appearance is fear and she's trying to make George afraid of it so that she won't do something foolish, and George is perceiving that as like, you don't believe in me. And her mother's both trying to protect her from the idea of this terrible world while warning her from it, and that push and pull defines so much of the novel. And then you have a book like Sadie, where Sadie's mother is, ooh, maybe I've got it out from others, I don't know. I have a great mother, so this is not indicative of my own upbringing, but I just think these relationships are so defining, and I love what they bring to a story, even if people don't necessarily see that presence on the page and like to make a little joke of it. But yeah, it's a huge umbrella over my novels, as much as I would say the sister theme is.
And it's also important, like, to showcase the fact that these characters, they're facing traumas throughout the whole book, but like one of the first traumas that you're introduced to is the lack of the mothers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that they're going through as well. They've had to grow up way too fast as it is, and they're still not ready for the adulthood that's been forced upon them.
Right. And when I think about George's mother, she wasn't ready to be a parent in those scenarios because this culture of silence surrounding these situations don't equip us to talk about these things productively. So like a part of what keeps them going and thriving is our inability to have that language with one another. I mean, who wants to have that conversation with their kid? You just want to believe that they're going to be okay in the end, and there's so much that's not okay out there, and you can find it all in a Courtney Summers novel.
So the moral of the story is start a parent-child book club.
Right.
Read Courtney Summers novels and then discuss.
I love this.
Okay. So Marissa is asking, how long did it take you to write I'm the Girl?
I think that was about, oh man, let's see. Sadie was 2018, and then I did the project. Right after I handed in the project, I think I was developing this idea. So maybe like when 21, 20, a couple of years. It's a blur. When you ask me to like timeline my writing process, I'm like, I wrote, that's interesting. I don't remember. I know that it was hard. I know that it was painful. If you ask me to start getting really specific about it, it's like my brain is like, don't go there. You'll never do it again.
So Mary's curious where the title comes
from? Because, I'm the Girl is a statement that is repeated throughout the novel. And despite this, it was one of the last things to fall into place. For the longest time, I'm the Girl is called The Body, but my editor didn't like that. They're like, it's too, I don't know, physically forward. Stephen King has a short story called The Body, which became Stand By Me. Maybe that was an issue. I don't know. I always liked it because so much is about bodily autonomy and women's sexuality, but I'm the Girl fit a lot better. And then we got that cool teardrop treatment on the cover. So I'm not sad about it. It was just something that when we were going through a bunch of titles, I got a bunch of terrible possibilities that I can't even remember. And I was just like, what about I'm the Girl? Like, just please don't do any of these. What about this one? And they're like, yeah, that'd work. So happy ending.
Yeah, good. So speaking of the cover art is gorgeous.
Isn't it? Of course, I'm so prepared for this. I don't even have a copy of my own book on hand.
Mine's way over there.
Yeah.
It's always a disaster when I try to hold up a book because I'm like, wait, what do I have to do? But anyway, my eyes watering all of a sudden. For a lot of authors that I've talked to, it's been kind of 50-50 whether or not they've been involved in the process of the cover art. Some say, yes, they were able to provide feedback, and some say they were never asked for feedback at all whatsoever. What was that like for you? Were you able to provide any feedback in the cover?
First of all, I have a great cover designer, that's Carrie Resnick, and she's always open to feedback, and I'm very grateful for that because I insist upon it. I am probably my least enjoyable when it's time to talk about covers with my publisher, because I'm not going to couch my opinions. I am not going to say, I don't think you should do this. I am so aggressively obnoxious about covers and not the least bit sorry about it, because it's the one thing that, I have to represent long after the promotional cycle is over. This book is going to follow me everywhere. So I'm like, if it's going to do that, and if this is the one thing I can have any amount of control over, because there's very little else you can control in the publishing process, I'm going to, if necessary, become a nightmare. And nobody wants to see that. So luckily, Wednesday Books is they're very open to my feedback, and a lot of the times they incorporate it. And Carrie came up with the teardrop. That was so amazing. She's like, hold on, I've got an idea. And I was like, what is it? And she sent it to me. I was like, that's the book. And she found the perfect cover artist. A lot of the times it's just me saying, I want a book that reflects this like Marilyn Monroe-esque character. I want it to sort of, Lolita was a vibe that I kept returning to. I kept sending like concepts of old Lolita covers where there was a lot of pink and a lot of the suggestion of violence. And because I didn't want a cover that was so pretty, you'd open it up and go, oh my God, what am I reading? So I really like the blur of lipstick. I think there's it kind of suggests that this book is it's not going to be an easy read, but so we gave it some good visual cues with the teardrop and everything. But yeah, I'm mouthy. That's a long way of saying I'm very mouthy about my covers.
So I was reading your book while enjoying some dinner at a restaurant.
Can that be possible? I didn't ruin your dinner? Are you sure? Okay.
Well, no, you didn't ruin my dinner. The gentleman that walked up and kept asking me about the book that I was trying.
Oh my gosh.
But that's fine. I mean, I guess the book begs the curiosity, but I always laugh when people say, "Oh, what are you reading?" Because I'm like, well, I'm trying to figure that out by reading it. But but anyway, the cover is what caught the person's eye, and he goes, "Oh, well, what is it about?" It looks like it's called "I'm the Girl," and there's a kind of a half of a beautiful face on the front. Is it like a book about women and self-discovery? And I was like, not quite.
Well, kind of.
Yeah. Anyway.
She said, yes, leave me alone. You can say anything about a book when someone comes up to you like that. You just lie. Feel good romantic comedy of the year.
It's like, I'm actually in a restaurant with food in front of me too. So I'm like, why are you okay? It's fine.
Books are supposed to be a line of defense against, not ever being bugged by other people. And now I guess it's good that there's still curiosity about books, though.
That is absolutely
we'll
true.
Take the win.
That is absolutely true. Especially now. The curiosity about books is so important.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm the Girl has been kind of given this moniker as a spiritual successor of Sadie. Can you describe really the relationship between the two?
Okay, so it takes place in the same universe as Sadie, and there's a character that connects both of the books together. And then if you pre-ordered the book, you got a bridge short story that sort of brought you on the journey of that connection. Like, you don't have to read the short story to know why these two worlds connect, but basically, I'm sure I can spoil it. I don't think it's a big deal. Georgia runs afoul a movie producer who has made Sadie into a movie, which for readers who have been dying to know what happened after Sadie, they can infer that, West sold out the story for entertainment purposes, which, West.
Yeah.
It's a bummer. No,
it was a bummer to hear that, because he sounds so sincere at the end of Sadie.
The short story is from his perspective, and it was really interesting to write because I don't think West is a bad man. I think West is a man who is sort of bound by the conventions of his profession, his privilege, and his own self-interest, because I don't think you can get all the way to the end of an experience like Sadie, at least in his case, and be entirely altruistic. I mean, what people don't want to believe about West is he was scripting himself from beginning to end. And I know that is so cynical. I don't think he's a bad man to the extent that maybe suggests, but I think he's a deeply flawed person. And I think when you are mass producing someone's trauma for bingeable content, something's going on with that. You might feel a little entitled. And I think the short story that I wrote really explored that. But at the same time, I like to think it's a bit sympathetic to him because he did not walk away from that experience unscathed. But like, Hollywood as a whole, it was also a reflection of the fact that when Sadie came out, it had a groundswell of like attention from Hollywood. And I talked to mostly men, and men wanted to use Sadie as a launching point to tell a story about West. So it was like, this could be a TV show and Sadie could be the first season, but this is really about West. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not about him at all. So yeah, so I think it was just a sort of reflection of a further reflection of this beautiful world that we occupy. I do believe in the world. I just want to say, I really believe in our capacity to be good, for however it's sounding right now.
Well, so Brandon, a different Brandon, not me, is asking about the experience writing Sadie. I mean, I know you said this was writing I'm the Girl was a very painful experience, and I cannot imagine the research that you had to do for Sadie not giving you bad dreams at night.
Sadie was disturbing in that sense, yes, in the way that they have all become sort of disturbing, and it was. This sounds so bad because I don't mean it like in a bad way, but it was really invigorating to write the podcast. So a lot of the times that helped, there was more of a balance with Sadie. Sadie is very dark and it's obviously very sad, but I also got to experiment with a new form of writing, which really invigorated and kept me from like this black hole of despair. Whereas like I'm the Girl and the project are so deeply entrenched in those characters' perspectives, I never got a break. So every time I got to step out of Sadie's head and consider the scenario from people who like West or people who didn't have her best interests at heart or the people that loved her the most, it's like, oh, I can breathe a little bit now. So it was upsetting. It did require a lot of research, and I used research to keep the integrity of the novel and the humanity of the characters at the forefront. But every time I got to go back to the podcast, I was like, this is awesome. It was such a neat way to explore a story. So it was a little bit less taxing, even though it's the book that upsets people the most.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the other part of Brandon's question was how did you balance the past and present storytelling, but you balanced it with the podcast, it sounds like.
Right, yep.
And speaking of the podcast, Pam was asking, can you talk about the importance of audiobooks? I'm an avid audiobook listener. And the reason I bring that up is because you just brought up the podcast, and I listened to Sadie like strictly on audiobook.
Right.
I read I'm the Girl in print, and then I listened to Sadie. And it really was like you're getting Sadie's side of the story, and then it's like, oh, here's a 10-minute break for a podcast. And like the production like sounded like I was really listening to a true crime podcast. Did you have any involvement in the production of the audiobook?
It was so weird when we started like plotting the marketing. I was like, if they're not going to do it, I'm going to commission a podcast for the podcast parts. And then I got to look at the marketing plan. It's like, oh, they're doing this. And I was like, oh my God, they're doing this, Yeah. And I had like no involvement whatsoever. I wish I could have said that I did, but they were, Macmillan Audio just was like, we're going to make this a whole thing. And they pulled in people from St. Martin's. Like most of the background cast is people who work on my books, which is very, very, very cool to hear. Maddie Argyropoulos is the producer. She doesn't work at Macmillan Audio anymore, but she just brought a level of like the layering, the sound, the musical cues, and Tim was, I think, her cohort with that. Like you can hear a clock ticking on the wall. It was just such a carefully constructed production, and I think it really, I mean, there's obviously like radio dramatizations out there. We have podcasts. The potential of audiobooks, I mean, it's already a legitimate form of reading a book. It's just so cool. I love all the places it can go. I love every time I pick up an audiobook and it's like multicast performance. I'm like, yes, I love voices. Like it's an exciting way to experience the story. It's just a nice way to do it. And when I heard Sadie, that was like the closest that I've ever gotten to how it must feel to read my own books. I was like, oh, okay, I get why people are upset about this novel now, because toward the end, Dan Bittner's voice, he did West, it broke. And I was like, that's mean. Why would they do that to me? It was so emotional for me. And I usually don't, because I know everything that's going to happen. I don't have that pure response. And that's what the audiobook gave me. It was very cool.
Yeah, the audiobook was excellent. It's the first audiobook that I have listened to that had more than 2 different voices. Like,
Ooh, cool.
like as far as characters went, like, yeah, I think the most was 2 different orators. Yeah, so this one was like kind of fun.
So many going on. Every time I think they just credited it. I wish that it was people, publishers are more in the habit of like crediting every voice that might appear on an audiobook, because for years after, I'd be finding out sometimes I wondered if people were doing multiple voices, and then I'd find out it was a whole new actor, and it was just like every time I thought I had gotten the cast down and a new voice would be revealed to me. There was just so many, and it was so cool.
Yeah. That is really cool. Christine, or not Christine, we already asked Christine's question. Sorry, Christine. Shonda is saying that, echoing everything we've said about the podcast, that for Shonda, this made for such a unique, quick-paced, and entertaining read. But I know some of my friends found the back and forth to be difficult to adjust to. Did you have any expectations for this, and how did you feel about the outcome, which you've talked about? You thought that it was very invigorating. Was it always supposed to be a podcast, or
the production of the audiobook, or
no, like outside of the audiobook, just like switching between Sadie and West?
Oh, it was. It actually, Sadie started as the podcast with West, and then I thought it was gonna only be a podcast because they'd never done anything like that before. And then I'm like, oh, inside the mind of broken teenage girls is like where I really excel. So why would I deprive that from this narrative?
Yeah.
It was always I looked at Sadie, and when I started, it was a response to a lot of what was going on with Serial at the time. I was like, this is a fascinating moment in our culture, and it has to have a huge emotional toll on everybody involved, just absolutely everyone who's bringing this to everyone's ears. And I was like, I want to explore that. So I was like, why can't a book be a podcast? Like, that makes no sense. But I was like, I'm going to follow that nonsensical line of reasoning until a book is a podcast.
Somebody just wrote a book called Comedy Bang Bang, a podcast, a book.
Oh my God. See, writers. We don't know our lanes, which is good.
Yeah, no, that is good. That's what you're for. So Jesse is saying Sadie and Lo from the project go to immense lengths to seek closure and answers. The aspect of sisterhood in Sadie and the project are one of my favorite parts of your books. Are you inspired by any siblings that you might have, or can you give any insight into how you decided to write main characters who are sisters?
Thank you. That's so nice. Well, the first sisters that appeared in my novels, it was This Is Not a Test. The zombie novel had a sister theme running through it, and then it disappeared, and then it came back for Sadie, and then it came back for the project, and there it is in I'm the Girl again. So obviously I've got something going on there, but I just think it's I have a sister myself. I'm the youngest, and I love her, and she's 5 years older than me. So like, she was always when I was younger, she was like this unknowable, incredibly cool girl that I was just like a whole world she was existing in that I didn't have access to just because of that age disparity. And it's just cool to have that dynamic in your life. And as it evolves, it gets, hopefully it's richer, it's deeper, it's more important, it's foundational. So I wanted to explore that. And then for an exhaustive chapter of my life, I was very obsessed with the television show Supernatural, and that's a brother dynamic. And I'm like, it'd be cool, they were all like, they were sisters, like I just think that sisters are sort of underserved in the media. So I'm just doing my job one book at a time to correct this. And I've outlasted Supernatural, so no.
Yeah, yep, that's true. Like, oh, I never thought of it like that. Well, sisters around the world, thank you. So we've had so many people for every author talk, but in particular today, that want to know about your journey to becoming a writer, and why YA, and like how do you change your writing style for YA and things like that?
Well, geez, my writing journey was kind of, well, I always like telling, it sounds so silly when I say it, but I always like telling stories. So, I thought I'd be doing something that was just dedicated to that. So for a while, I thought I'd be an actor. Then I thought I'd be a screenwriter. And then I thought I'd be a musician. And my, my talents did not meet up with my hopes for myself in that regard. But when I sat down to write a novel, I was like, oh, this makes sense. This is the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And then I was a high schooler, and I was like, nothing about what I'm doing here makes sense to me. So I dropped out of high school when I was 15, and I was like, I'm going to dedicate this time that I would be doing the whole high school thing to figuring out what I want to do with my life. And that's how I arrived at novels. And when my friends were going to college, I was like, I'm going to become a published author if it kills me. And it just about did. It's like it was an intense journey because once you drop out of high school and you don't get the whole GED, you're like, you might have limited my options a little bit for like an impossible dream here. I'm lucky it turned out the way that it did. So yeah, that was, I queried an agent. They liked the book. It took one yes from an agent who found an editor who said yes. It was very straightforward when it happened. And as far as, I have never tempered my voice for YA ever. And I feel like, I don't mean it in a snippy way, but like, I'm like, if you've read my books, I hope that's, plain. That there's really there's no limitation that I'm willing to write to. I just want to tell a story that feels as honest as it can. And the parameters are being honest, are being real. And I will fight for that authenticity. That's the one thing that I'll go to the mat for. And there was a lot of push and pull in the I'm the Girl editorial process, because there was a real concern about bad faith reads when it came to its depiction of rape and grooming, which is, what it is depicting is real. It happens. It was thoroughly researched. It was vetted by sensitivity reads and outside readers who could speak to it and say, yes, this is correct. But when you put an imperfect victim in front of a larger audience, they're going to decide that it's problematic because it's not moralizing at the expense of its main character. It's not using the text as an opportunity to throw victims under the bus to make you feel better about what they're going through. And every time I got something presented to me that would be in service of people who didn't want to empathize with Georgia, I rejected it. And that was probably one of the more intense editorial things. But I'm a Taurus. I'm stubborn.
Yeah. That's good though. Like that's part of what makes your writing and your story so strong.
Thank you.
Stick to that. And there's no apology. There shouldn't be apology for it anyway.
Right.
What is how the world is.
It is. And I think, if we're asking people to apologize or disclaim abusers' behaviors, then we've got larger problems than what I'm writing about in books.
Absolutely. So among all of the books that you've written so far, I used to ask authors what is their favorite, but the answer is always the same, either all of them or the most recent one that they've written. So kind of rewinding that and taking it back a little bit, is there one that has more personal significance to you than another?
Oh man, I don't know. I do feel a lot of affinity for I'm the Girl because I wrote that book and I thought everyone is gonna love Georgia. I deeply believed in her, and you have to occupy a space that does unquestioningly and unfailingly believe in a girl like Georgia, because you have no business writing her otherwise. And I was like, people will see what I'm seeing, and she's ended up one of the most divisive characters that I've ever written for exactly the reasons why I needed to write her. Yeah. And every time that someone sort of, I guess, misunderstand. And I'm not talking about not liking the books. You can absolutely not like a book, and that's totally valid. But I mean, every time I see her sort of fundamentally misunderstood in a way that upholds a misogynistic response, I'm like, oh, I just feel so, like my whole heart's wrapped around that book. I think I was so deeply entrenched in that headspace of hers that when someone comes for it, I'm like, I just feel like, this, my chest, it's in my chest. Yeah. But I dedicated the project to myself, so I must have, that was fun too.
Yeah, that is fun. That's good. So Maz, or M-A-Z, I'm sorry if I'm not saying that correctly, wants to know, what's your book and character planning process like?
I just throw myself into a deep end and hope for the best. I mean, it's the thing is, I say this a lot, and it sounds like such a cop out answer, but every book is only going to teach you how to write itself. So if I think that I know to do what I'm doing, I'm going to be shown otherwise as soon as, like, not long after I've begun. I have a basic idea of where I want to go, and then I let it take me there. And it's never clean. It's always messy. It's always painful. It always feels worth it. At least I can say that much.
Do you write like so many words a day, or just like until you can't emotionally take it anymore?
Yeah, I do what I can. It's like if it used to be, I'd be like, I gotta meet. Well, sometimes you do have to meet a certain amount of words because you're under a contractual deadline. And if you don't meet your deadline, people are going to be very unhappy. But, I just kind of take the perspective that a word written is one word more than you had, and the book will get done when it's meant to be done. Unless people are expecting it, then it's got to be done when you're told it should be
Yeah.
done.
The other way, it takes so much pressure off, though.
Yeah, it does. I have rarely occupied that space, I have to admit, but
What do you hope that readers take away from your writing? I know we've talked about a lot of things that we hope that society at large changes
right.
today, but what do you hope that readers take away from your writing?
I think with, like, I want to give them the space to do whatever they want when they pick up my book. If they want to, like, throw it across the room, I don't want them to be indifferent. I think that's a damning thing to have someone walk away from your book going, eh, if they hate it, great. If they love it, even better for me personally. But so there's that. I want them to have the freedom of that response. That's why my endings, I think, are often so open-ended. It's like, here, take it, do what you will. But, like, the overarching desire is that with each book, I think I've given people a space to respond to empathy to some very difficult young women who are going through some very hard times. And when they're confronted with that choice to empathize with them, I hope I hope that they will. You have a space to believe a young woman. It's not going to cost you anything. You're not going to lose your reputation over it. You're not putting anything on the line by doing it. Please believe her.
Yes, please believe her. I agree with that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So Jen is asking, let's see, what time is it? Okay. So one of the last questions I always ask is books that you're reading right now that you think everyone must run to the library and check out. But Jen is asking something similar, but a little different. Jen's saying, who are the authors that you admire or have influenced your work?
Gosh. Okay. Well, Robert Cormier, who wrote the Chocolate War, he was a big influence early on because he wrote a book about a chocolate bar sale in a Catholic school, and it turned out to be like the most bloodlusty, bleak, horrendous, like, emotionally taxing book that I've ever read, with no easy answer at the end. I was like, wow, you can do that in YA? Like, this is a book about selling chocolates, and at the end of it, the character's like, I don't believe in the world anymore. It's so good.
Wow.
I love the freedom of that. And lately I've gotten into uh Joan Didion. I've just started exploring her entire everything. And she'll pick a topic, and I'm like, I don't care about this, Joan. Like, I'm really going to read this. And then she makes me care because just the way she articulates her ideas and gets so emotionally invested in them, that's something that speaks to me. I love Emily St. John Mandel, oh God, there's so many. Oh, Maureen Gu, like, okay, Maureen Gu is such an inspiration to me. She doesn't even realize it, but she has such an optimism in her work that kind of crept up on me. Like, she's a close friend, but, like, as the more I do this, the more vital I realize that optimism to infuse into your work, to just approach something so generously, is important. I don't know that I'll ever be able to do it, but when I look at what it accomplishes and how it makes me feel, it makes me at least look for moments of reprieve in my own work.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's been a huge influence of late. And like, I've just been loving going through people's backlists and stuff to see how they evolve as writers. That's been a lot of fun for me too. So Yeah, but mostly it's them right now. I'm like, and then I just started reading about David Lynch. What a wild man. It's like
Yeah.
a wild man. He's very interesting. I'm very interested in other people's creative processes right now, and he's interesting.
How many books do you read a week, a month?
I'm having like the best reading year of my life right now because I think it's because I'm between books. So I'm up to like 70 or something like that, which
Oh,
is like
wow.
not. I know it's not. That's not in any way typical for me. It just started and it hasn't stopped. So I'm like I don't want to jinx it. And I'm trying to make sure like when I feel a lull, like I'll go to poetry or I'll go to like something that I don't or a novella or something like that. I'm just really I'm like I want to keep this good thing going.
Yeah,
So
that's amazing. I mean, I interview authors for a living, and I haven't read 70 books this year.
it's absolutely not typical. I promise. It's like I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, what's right with me right now? Actually, this is happening.
That's amazing. Let's keep it up. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you.
All right, Courtney. So we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so
So much
much
for being here.
fun.
Yes,
Such
this
good
hour
vibes.
truly flew by. You said a lot of important things. We brought up a lot of important issues. Your books are amazing, and everybody should run to their library and check them out right now. Well, let me finish this and then you can do that. But with that, I also want to extend a huge thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in to the Author Talk today. Without your
Thank you.
support, of course, none of this would be possible. So we thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. As a reminder, below the live stream video, you can find a link to Courtney's book, I'm the Girl, under the resources tab. We look forward to seeing you all on June 7th when we chat with psychologist and fun scientist Mike Rucker about his new book, The Fun Habit. And again on June 15th when we talk to photographer, artist, and New York Times bestselling author Jamie Beck about her book, An American in Provence. You can register for this and lots of other great events on your library's event page. I am Brandon Adler. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a